Well, hello, friends, and thank you for joining me on the Thursday edition of the Daily Connection. It's a time when we get together in the Word, and more importantly, the Word gets into us. And so today we're really getting to the meat of what we're talking about when our faith should dictate or determine our conversation material. Because Paul is going to tell us here in Ephesians chapter 4, verse 29 and following, no foul language should come from your mouth, but only what is good for building up someone in need so that it gives grace to those who hear. And do not grieve God's Holy Spirit. You were sealed by Him for the day of redemption. So here Paul uses the word foul. It's a word that was often used to describe fruit or vegetables that had gone past their prime. In fact, they had begun to rot. So we could say let no rotten language. It could be associated with things like profanity, vulgarity. I mean, we can make the applications there, but I'm going to trust you to do that. The whole idea is that what comes out of our mouth must be consistent with who we claim is now within our heart. That's why I kind of connect it to verse 30. It says, don't grieve the Holy Spirit. And if you get down to it, it really is a heart matter here. When he talks about letting no foul language, he's not just talking about, making sure, being careful of what you say. He's really saying that what you say should be a direct reflection of whose you are. It makes me think about Matthew chapter 12. There, Jesus talking to the crowd and talking specifically to the religious leaders in verse 34. He says, brood of vipers, how can you speak good things when you're evil? For the mouth speaks from the overflow of the heart. A good person produces good things from his storeroom of good, and an evil person produces evil things from his storeroom of good. I tell you that on the day of judgment, people will have to give an account for every careless word they speak. For by your words you will be acquitted, and by your words you will be condemned. Now, that really brings it to the heart of the matter, which is out of the overflow of what's within our heart. That's what then produces the words. And Jesus says, the words that you speak, you will give an account for. I mean, hopefully that frames it enough to where we give serious consideration, because it seems nowadays that we just flippantly throw things out there without giving them careful thought and attention. And I'm just as guilty as anybody. There's times when you get caught up in the moment, and you get swept up in the emotion. And of course, I'm not speaking of profanity or vulgarity or anything like that, but just something that might be a little off color or something that might be inappropriate to that moment. The idea here, although the word foul is what's used in verse 29, the idea is also only what is good for building someone up. So it's not just what we don't speak, but it's also what we do speak. Make sure that when we speak something, that it's something that's going to be edifying, it's going to be beneficial, it's going to be positive, constructive. And that's another thing. We need to make sure we don't see this as Paul's way of saying, hey, don't ever speak anything that might be somewhat negative or it might be somewhat difficult to receive. That's not what he's saying. We do speak the truth in love, but we speak the truth. That means that I'm carefully calculating when I say it, how I say it, my tone, when I say it, is there a crowd there? Or are we in a smaller group, or are we in an accountability group, or are we in private? That can go a long way into it, because really the ultimate goal is that what I'm saying is necessary to build up. And sometimes that means confronting things in the life of a person that shouldn't be there. So to me, that's not a negative statement. That may be received. It may be negative as far as what I'm trying to communicate, but I'm speaking it for a positive, constructive ending. And that's the thing. If what I say and how I act is for the overall greater good to produce a positive, constructive outcome, Paul says that's the speech we should use. And the other reason why it should be that way, he says in verse, let me think about, in kind of a corollary, a close correspondence to this, Paul says this in Colossians chapter 4, talking about speech. He says, act wisely toward outsiders. I'm in verse 5 of Colossians 4. Act wisely to outsiders, making the most of the time. Let your speech always be gracious, seasoned with salt, so that you may know how you should answer each person. So there again, the idea of our speech being gracious, seasoned with salt, means it's preservative. It's going to produce what is good. It's a seasoning, meaning it's going to add something to enrich it and enhance it. And that's the idea here. And ultimately, Paul says, don't grieve the Holy Spirit. So when I speak something that is rotten, foul language, or when I speak something that is not beneficial, constructive, doesn't build up, then I'm grieving the Holy Spirit. That's basically what he's saying here in verse 3. Which means I'm causing great sorrow to come to the Holy Spirit. Of course, if you grieve the Holy Spirit, and then you reach a point where you might even quench the Spirit, so the Spirit's power the awareness of the presence, all that is somewhat thwarted in your life. Paul says, don't do that. He says, because the Spirit is the seal. He's the sign. He's the assurance of your salvation. By Him, it says we were sealed for the day of redemption. So we make certain that we measure our speech carefully. We calculate our speech. We're careful when we say it, how we say it. We're also, how should we say, critiquing it, making sure that what we say will bring about a positive outcome. It won't just confront that brother or sister in their situation, but ultimately it will compel them to get beyond that, to not just feel the guilt and the shame of that circumstance, but to see that, hey, there is a way out through this, and that's the ultimate end goal. Not to put you down in that season, but to then bring you positively through and on the other side of that season, to build up. Well, this is tough because, like I said, we're in a day and time where people just say things off the cuff, often without thinking, and now people don't even apologize for it. They say, "Oh well, if that offended you, so be it." Well, that's not the heart of a believer. That's not the heart attitude of a believer. Our desire is to build up. Our desire is to help bring a brother or sister along, to be a positive influence in their life. And we must make sure that even in our speech, especially in our speech, that what we say and how we say it, and when we say it, all the key components of that are for the purpose of building them up, not just tearing them down. Well, love you, faith family. You're almost there. Stay strong. Stay committed. Most importantly, live sent.